Thank you, Mr Acting Speaker. Mr Acting Speaker, I'd just like to make a small contribution to this debate. I won't cover the area which has been covered by many of the previous speakers already, and don't need to repeat what they've said. In terms of my observations on the Estimates Committee, and I had the privilege of actually chairing one of those committees, and I think that sometimes I think what they are designed for is sometimes misunderstood. And the Estimates Committee, which is predominantly to inquire into the budget itself in detail, and that is appropriate to hold the government of the day to account. Sometimes it becomes a quasi-question time and other forums. So, but that aside, it's a useful process, and it's there for predominantly for the opposition of the day to inquire into and to look into detail of the budget presented, and to, as I said, to help hold the government of the day accountable for the budget itself. In terms of the budget itself, if Mr Acting Speaker, if I was to talk about some key themes of the budget itself, I'd say there would be three things. The three things are housing, health and hope. And I think this budget was about housing, health and hope, in the sense that it clearly had a strong focus on housing. It identified a whole range of areas to be released for land, to put land on the market, to make sure we keep property prices down as low as possible. But in addition to that, with the release of new land comes a whole range of challenges around infrastructure. And this government has, I think, fully understood the need of infrastructure, not only within those developments, but the impact those developments have on the adjacent areas. And that's why they've actually established, I can't remember the full title, but it's the Housing Infrastructure Unit within the Department of Investment and Trade, within the planning area. And that unit's responsibility is to identify the infrastructure needs of these new growth areas. And I have some growth areas in my area and also adjacent to my area, and have a major impact on my region. So the delivery of infrastructure in a timely fashion is really important. And it's not just infrastructure in terms of roads, etc., but also the other bits of infrastructure like schools, health services, policing, etc. Because when you have quite a significant growth, like one which is proposed for Concordia, an additional 25,000 people, that's essentially the existing size of Gawler once again. And so we're going to need, obviously, look at how will the health services be delivered to that region, how will policing services be delivered to that region, how a whole range of services be delivered to the region, and schools, etc. So it's really, the unit will obviously look at some of those upfront things, but also, very importantly, start advising departments and agencies about making sure the infrastructure is put into their plans for the future. So as residents arrive and as businesses arrive, the infrastructure there is there to support them. Some of the infrastructure requirements for Concordia, and I'm on the record already, and I'll just repeat, are very important. Clearly, some of the areas are some sort of bypass road linking up Lyndoch Road with the Sturt Highway is very important. For the additional traffic which will be generated by the Concordia development, but more importantly, or just as importantly, to remove the remaining heavy trucks which go down Lyndoch Road and Murray Street, which is a core part of Gawler, to make sure they are shifted out of there, and that bypass, or link road, we like to call it, is very critical and is probably what you might almost call a precondition of that development. The other important condition, amongst other things, would be the provision of public transport for this new area, and we need to work out how we're actually going to integrate the Concordia development into the rail system, which is the rail system that now we've invested hundreds of millions of dollars in upgrading the rail system. We need to make sure that people in that area have access to the rail system to take them from anywhere from Concordia to the City Valley. In fact, they can take them right down to Flinders University, now that has a station there as well. So they're two important things. There's a whole range of other factors that need to be taken into account. Water management, energy saving provisions. They're all things, in some ways, are easier to deal with these days because we understand them better. Some of those bigger issues will take some thinking and obviously some broad thinking to make sure we address those. The government's also reduced stamp duty for first home owners, which I think is really important to get young people into the home ownership market. And I saw some figures just recently which said that basically those people in early 20s to mid 30s in terms of home ownership, or it's been the lowest rate since data has been collected. So it is getting increasingly harder for young people to enter the housing market. And if you talk to young people, they do still aspire to have a house. It's one of those great Australian dreams that you actually own your home. Not only is housing hard to get to because getting the size of deposit, interest rates, etc., but also rent prices have gone through the roof. Fortunately, the government's investing hundreds of millions of dollars in public and social housing, and I understand this year will be the first time in over 20 years that the stock of public housing will not decrease, or actually will increase over the life of this government. It will be the first time in like 20 years that the housing stock held by the public authorities for public housing and social housing will actually increase, or a net increase. And that's a major achievement because the trend has been the other way for a long time. And we need to make sure that we do understand that while we have policies for affordable housing, the affordable housing point price is not exactly affordable by many people. A lot of people just will not be able to afford it, because I think it's over the $400,000 mark for affordable housing. And for a lot of people, that just actually are frozen out of the market. So we still need public and social housing to make sure that everybody has a reasonable roof over their head, not only themselves and their families. And just on that, I'm sad to say that the number of homeless people I see in my own town now is probably the worst I've ever seen it since I've been involved in public life. So we have a long way to go. This government is making every endeavour to do that, supported by the Commonwealth, who's making billions of dollars available for housing. Combined with our policies to release land, hopefully we'll make some inroads to make sure that people get reasonable housing in this area. In my own area, I know there's some additional public housing being built as we speak now, in conjunction with the private sector, and that should certainly help some bottlenecks in my community. But we have a long way to go. In terms of the other thing of health, the government has made it very clear that health is the number one priority, and that's reflected in the billions of dollars the government is actually investing over the term of this government to make sure that we actually have a health system which actually provides people with the health care they need at the time they need it. In terms of the time they need it, we are actually increasing investment in the ambulance service. And my own town has an additional unit now, and certainly the wait times have gone down dramatically since we have now an additional unit in my town of Gawler. So people can be rest assured if you need an ambulance, the ambulance will get there on time to look after you. Mr. Acting Speaker, the other areas I like to, in terms of hope, I think the government's doing what it can with support of the Commonwealth again to provide some direct support to those families doing it hard through a range of concessions and electricity concessions and other concessions to make sure that people doing it the toughest, and this is a direct support, which I think is important, a targeted support, I should say. It's very important that we do target our support for those doing it the toughest in this time. The other thing which I'd like to just briefly speak about is one thing which I'm also very pleased. I'd like to commend the Minister of Education and Skills as well, because he's now put in place a process and also funding to rebuild our TAFE system. In my view, the TAFE system was downgraded by the previous government, and it's certainly my view is that's from my point of view, from my area, we had a number of programs shifted from the northern areas, which young people weren't able to access. And not only that, there were some courses under the skies of contestability, and I don't have any difficulty with actually the concept of contestability, but when the public provider was not allowed to actually compete in that market, I can't see where the contestability exists. Basically, the public provider was actually frozen out of the marketplace, and so what was happening is that some of the more expensive courses were left in the public sector, the more cheaper courses to run were left in the private sector, and then they was trying to compare those apples and oranges, and that was an unfair comparison. And I'm not sure that the previous government had the commitment to the TAFE sector as this government does, and I commend the Minister and the government making that commitment. I think it's important that the public sector is in the marketplace. The public sector can actually take into account not only what the course offerings are, but also issues around equity to make sure sometimes even some courses which don't have a lot of students are needed in certain areas to make sure that our young people throughout the state have access to the appropriate training and skills. And in particular at the moment, we seem to have a skills shortage right across the board, a whole range of areas. And so I do commend Minister Bowyer for his commitment to the TAFE sector. The other thing I'd just like to very quickly comment on, all the commitments we made to my electorate, those commitments are all being delivered. Some have been delivered already, and some are in the process of being delivered through tenders, etc. And I am 100% certain that every commitment we've made in my electorate should be delivered by end of next year, end of this financial year, which certainly been well welcomed by the community. There's a whole range of road safety measures which have been delivered. There's a whole range of social sporting infrastructure which is going to be delivered, which is hugely required. One thing when we need to do, Mr. Speaker, I think, Acting Speaker, as both local government, state government and federal governments, I think we need to work closely together, those governments, is the rise in sport and participation by young women and women. Great policy, I have no difficulties with it, but the infrastructure is not keeping up with those requirements. Certainly in my town, we still have young women who actually, for their sporting events, have to change in their motor vehicles, etc. And that's just unacceptable. We need to invest. We need some sort of agreement between state, federal and local government to accelerate that program of rolling out infrastructure to meet the needs of young women and women generally. And there has to be a partnership. It can't be a case where one sphere of government is holding it up, because the benefits are to local communities, and therefore the local councils should make a contribution. But also, given the rapid increase, I acknowledge that the whole lot is beyond the means of some local councils, and therefore state and federal governments need to make some contribution, an appropriate contribution towards that. And that's again that issue of equity, and that's where the public sector can come in by making sure that we can use the financial resources of both the state and Commonwealth government to make sure there's equity across the state and that young people are not left behind. Mr. Acting Speaker, there's some of the issues, and one, you could speak for hours on this issue of the budget. Like I said, I won't repeat what's been discussed by other speakers already, but there's some of the issues which are very important to my community and which are highlighted, and certainly this government is delivering on some of those priorities. And like I said, we are delivering on housing, health and hope.